Hello, welcome back to the podcast Journey to Well. My name is Hannah, and today we get to talk about Eastern philosophy, Eastern medicine. I'm joined with Brett Aldrich. She's a breath worker and Ayurvedic counselor and founder of Seed the Spirit. And I was telling you, Brett, my mom's really into Ayurveda, which is how I got introduced to it originally. And I talk about Ayurvedic practices just more generally with my one-on-one coaching clients, but I don't know that I've talked about it on a podcast before. So I'm super excited to have you. Thank you for coming and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And we're going to be talking about winter and finding balance within different seasons. And if you've never heard of Ayurveda before, you are okay. Keep listening because we're going to get a good background knowledge and foundation of Ayurveda and then kind of talk about how that weaves into our practices and what we can do throughout this winter season, kind of coming into the spring. So, you know that my favorite thing is to let my podcast guests introduce themselves. So before we get into all of that, who is Brett and who are we having the pleasure of learning from today?
Thank you, Hannah. I'm excited to talk about all of this. Well, how did I begin? I guess. So I began working in a very high stress environment, work environment, long ago. And then after having my first child, I decided to stay home full time. I found that after having children, I just was like, I'm a very different person, right? So
Mm,
you go through a big change. The usual things that I would typically do to kind of assist myself to feel better, or back then I wanted to get back into shape, all of those things, or just feel more like stronger physically and mentally as well. Over time, I realized I needed more support than what I typically did in many different ways. So I fell into yoga briefly, just the physical practice of yoga, the asana practice. The philosophy came later, the understanding of all of that. But I was brought in through the physical practice, and then it just started from there. And then, gosh, so many years later, I started to slowly understand a little more at a time what it really was to practice yoga, and it is a life practice,
yeah.
not just a physical practice. And so then I just wanted to know more. So I was like, all right, so what is this? So I didn't really try to find it. I learned how to teach yoga, practice yoga and teach yoga. I was certified to teach that as well, to be a yoga teacher. But then I wanted to know more, right? There was
Mm,
something like, wait, I think something's missing here. Like I'm missing something. Like I know there's more to this. I love what I'm doing, but I know I'm missing something. I'm missing something. And then I just went to a store one day and I looked over to the side and there was a little card and it said Ayurveda Dinacharya, which in Dinacharya means the daily practice. And it had a little like clock of the day of the time and what to do, when to do things at a certain time of day. And it taught about how to take care of your body throughout the day, just little tips. And then I was like, what's that? So I picked it up just out of curiosity and I read it. And that was also during a time of my life where, again, I was going through physical change and life changes. And so, well, I'll try this. Still unknowing, just knowing it was related to yoga. And now I learn is the sister, as they coin the sister science to yoga.
mm,
And so I tried it and I tried it for a couple weeks. I'm like, actually, like this is really doing something.
wow.
So the small pieces, the beginning stages of this, and then I just again was like, you know what? I think this is something that could be useful for me and for anybody else. And it went from there
Wow.
more, and then decided to get my education in Ayurveda and just start the process and practice. And I needed it first
Mm,
and foremost with what I needed and to supply, nutrients to my body and also taking care of my body in another way in the physical sense. And I didn't have to do a rigorous, I came to the realization the things that I was doing, I didn't have to do. And there
yeah.
were other things that I could have taken the place of it that over time created more balance. And that was the big piece of it was like, oh, so I was doing all of these things thinking that this was what I was supposed to be doing, which is great for probably many people. However, for me and the way I operate and the way my body works, I was like, there was actually maybe you shouldn't do those, but you can do these other things. And
Yeah.
that really started to make some sense. I was like, oh, so all of this stuff is good for me or for someone, right?
Hmm.
All these things are great, but I can pick and choose, and I don't always have to do this one thing just because I
Mm.
just have this idea. So
Yeah.
really that's kind of how it began. So that's a long story about how it began, but that's how it went. Yeah.
I love the tools that help us learn like, oh, this might work, but this thing might work better. And I think I've talked about that a lot on my podcast and because I've experienced it in my own life, even if we're talking about a diet and you meet someone and they're like, I feel amazing doing keto, let's say, right? And like you have to do it and they really excite you and they get you hooked on it. And then you try it and you're like, I must be doing something wrong. Like I'm either not getting results or I feel terrible or it's not working for me or I'm not able to stay consistent with it. It doesn't mean that it is not working for someone, but maybe it doesn't work for you and your body type and where you are in your life. And the little bit that I know about Ayurveda, that rings true for sure. It's kind of this introduction of learning your body type, and how you can best support your energy. So for people that have heard of the word, because it's not, this is obviously not a new practice, but I would guess that a lot of people don't really know what Ayurveda is. So I think we need to start there with what is Ayurveda, and then we'll get into other deeper questions.
Sure. In Ayurveda, in like any, indigenous ancient practice of different countries or lands or cultures, it's really deep and it's really broad and there's a lot to it, right? So it can feel a little overwhelming thinking about what is this? How can I do this? How can I bring this into my life? Ayurveda, from how I was taught, is really what they call the study of life. Everything matters. Everything could be medicinal for you, or other things could be poison for you, depending on timing, quality, and quantity, and when you bring it into your life. So, really has the coin statement of it all depends on your situation of what would
Hmm.
work best for you. They are based on trying to utilizing um, what you're made out of and then what everything else is made out of and finding balance in that. And a big piece of it, what Ayurveda really does focus on too, is what we call the elements. So everything is made out of five elements, and those elements have characteristics. And those elements trickle down into energy centers, what we call doshas, which can also describe everything around us, including ourselves. Some of the differences is when we're taking doshas and describing ourselves, it also brings in character and emotional tendencies,
Mhm.
which is also interesting. So the elements are primarily or only fire, water, air, ether, and earth.
Mhm.
And those are the five elements that Ayurveda typically utilizes. And it's an indigenous practice, so it's native to India. However, elements we consider are everywhere. So I find this to be a good foundation for myself.
Mhm.
And that's where I go from. And these elements all eventually can create or go together as the doshas, the energy centers. So there's Vata, which is a dosha, which is air and ether combination of the elements. There's pitta, which is the dosha, which can be the water and fire element combination. And then there's kapha, or some say kapha, um, and that is the elements of earth and water.
Mhm.
So when we kind of like get to know someone or you get to know yourself, these qualities or these elements have qualities and description. And over time, we sort of go, oh, okay, so fire, right? It's red, it's hot, it digests, it transcends, it changes things. It's an alchemy in a way, right? You put things together, bring fire onto it, it turns into something else. So that's a lot of pitta. So so we can kind of understand what we're made out of. And then our food also is made out of these elements, right? The spices that we place into our food also have elements. So, for example, someone like myself, if I have a lot of fire and water within me, if I want to eat something, I would probably eat less spicy food, right? Because
Mm.
I would ingest something maybe a little bit cooler to the body. So to find internal balance. So we want to make sure when we eat, there's times of days that we should probably eat more than another time of day. So even the day has different doshas. So the day even has its own dosha clock, right? So a time of day where it's best to be resting, a time of day where it's like noon or around that time is a good time to eat our largest meal because that's when our digestion is working more, it is more rigorous or more active.
Hmm.
We work by the sun.
Mm.
So 24-hour clock, and that's kind of how we create our day. So really it is relative to just our life and finding balance and getting to know the elements to the point where we can use it to our benefit.
Mm.
Find balance inside and mentally too as well. Mental balance, internal physical balance, our environment. Yeah, everything is included in this process. It's also spiritual too, if that's something that people tend to are geared to as well. There is some pieces there too that the body is a vessel that holds on to the universe, as we say, and so um, some of us feel that way.
Yeah.
And so taking care of that vessel and knowing we're connected to everything around us. And that's a big piece too, is eating natural, organic, hopefully, or natural foods, whole foods, and creating them to be a medicine for us.
Mm. It's a lot of cooked foods too, right? Or is that for a specific dosha?
Right. So, yes, the advice is to eat cooked foods,
Okay.
moist foods, and foods that can hydrate. So we not only hydrate with water, but our food hydrates us as well. And in order to assimilate and to really like receive the nutrients of our food, it is advised to have cooked food. It's easier to process. And it keeps our agni, we call it our agni or our digestive fire, it keeps it running.
Mm.
You're able to eat your food and process it while you're eating it.
Yeah.
Um, that's a piece of it as well. And we don't put ice in our water. We try to drink warm beverages or room temperature beverages, to continue the digestion and the transformation of what we're ingesting. So it
Mm.
could be food or life.
Mm.
So if our digestive fire is working well, it's food and life that we're able to metabolize
Wow.
what we're working on. And we do, and also what music we listen to, if we sing, if how we move our bodies, it's all related to the elements. And if we look into that, if we're feeling a little sluggish and tired, dancing could be a great way to like change things around and to find balance in the body. If you've been busy that day and moving a lot that day, maybe your practice that day, physical practice is just lying down on the floor for 20 minutes. It all
Mm.
really just depends um, on what you're trying to do in order to just maintain yourself
Mm.
with the life.
So if we have these, we're all one of three doshas primarily. So from what I understand, we're kind of all three, but we have a kind of a more prominent one.
Mhm.
Um, are there specific foods and movement and activities that aid each dosha? And does that change like for the day of the week or the season, or does that kind of stay the same?
Well, if this is how if you're dealing with something specific, right? If I'm a person, I'm like, I'm dealing with something really specific that's really I'm feeling symptoms, right? With
Mm.
specific, or if it's like, I'm having a hard time like processing my food and I feel like uncomfortable after I eat. There are certain postures and things you can do physically to take care of that issue, laying on your belly. There's just sitting and seated and doing like mild, easy breath work, which could be like just in and out of the nose, taking fennel after you eat, things like that. However, When it comes to activities and food, we do typically go by seasonal living.
Mm.
So winter, summer, fall, and then there's that transition right between each season that's kind of like a little bit of both. So we do create, or there are ways to choose foods, activities, movement, breath work, even during those transitions and during the season to support the body. And if you are more of one dosha than another one, you kind of like do a little more of one thing versus another, things like that, as you get to understand it a little bit more within your own body. Because in the wintertime, if you have a lot of vata in your body, if you have a lot of ether and air, this time of year is challenging. So we do more than probably what someone like has a lot of earth in them. You would do more like calming of the nervous system, eating foods that are more brothy and warm, because we tend to get more irritated in the cold weather, right? Like increases like. So
Yeah.
if you have more of the same thing over and over and over again, you can create an imbalance within yourself. So we try to find the balance that way too as well.
Hmm.
So I think that makes sense. So really it is so wintertime it is about soothing the nervous system, nourishing the tissues of the body, making sure you are hydrated with warm beverages. Some of us have warm milk before bed, not everybody, but in the evenings, waking up in the morning and making sure you're taking care of your agni and eating foods that are a little bit spicier, a little bit warming in nature with the spices. However, not so much that you're like, you know, it's too spicy and your face is red, but
Your mouth.
like maintaining, right? Like your body in a kind way, right? Kindness is key when it comes to wintertime. And in our practices are similar, like they're grounding and warming to the body. So there is movement. However, we're not jumping up and down and, you know, uh, overdoing it physically too often, just enough when it comes to our practices. And then coming towards spring, we start to get a little bit more active. We want our foods to be a little bit more brothier, a little bit warmer as well. Come springtime, we want to do more cleansing foods because we're trying to cleanse out all the heaviness of wintertime,
Mm.
heading towards that. So we do more cleansing foods. Usually, sometimes some of us do a cleanse during that time of year as well to get rid of the excess cold, the excess heaviness. And sometimes some of us have like irritated joints. We try to get all of that either inflammation or what we call ama or undigested or processed matter
Mm.
that we have sometimes after the wintertime. And we try to keep that going and just making sure we're cleansing the body, but also supporting it at the same time.
Mm.
And that's what we do. Yeah. And we just keep, and again, looking at the elements and those characteristics and making sure we're finding balance. And really, it is trial and error sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Are we moving from Vata to Pitta or Vata to Kapha?
Right now, we're moving from vata to kapha.
Oh,
Yeah,
I'm a
so we
Kapha.
consider, yeah, so like, right, so this time of year is depending on how you're feeling and also the time of life, right? So going from Vata to Kapha, we are moving from the colder, more windier,
Yeah,
mobile time, and we're heading to the more of the heavier, um, it's still cold. It's
yeah,
still cool then. So we're trying to find that balance, right? So in our mind's eye, like what would be helpful for us from that cold time to another cooler time, but heavy time, right? So what
yeah,
would we do to balance that out? And you can do it so many different ways.
mm,
Um, Not just your food, but food is also helpful because that is
mm,
really what we do every day. And with Ayurveda, really it is too, is what we do every day makes a difference. And it could be
mm.
small to large. And those practices that we do every day does create how the body is feeling.
Yeah, it's super
Yeah.
interesting because a lot of what I teach I call it cycle alignment, like aligning to our cycle, which is
Mhm.
whether you're someone that like menstruates or not, and even if you're a male, we have cycles, whether you're talking about the 4 seasons, you're talking about the moon phases, you're talking about your menstrual cycle. And I really love how this really just aligns and supports and actually gives more suggestions for how you can support your body, because our winter phase is like our menstrual phase, and it's like when you're talking about the vata and like being cold and how can you feed your body nourishing foods, and what movement, maybe it's not really hot sweaty exercise in the winter time, maybe it is just going for a walk or doing some gentle yoga, or like you said, just laying on the floor and like moving your body a little bit. There's a lot that we can do to support our cycle, like our inner cycle, which I'm drawing a lot of conclusions, and like um I'm drawing a lot together of
Mhm.
Ayurveda, and just like kind of talking about what I use more, just kind of cyclical living. But there's a lot that again, well, no, I don't think again, my mom is very into Ayurveda. I think I told you that before we started recording. So,
Yeah.
my mom has been the introduction to Ayurveda for me. And it was mostly, I think, in college when I first started, but you can go online and like take a dosha quiz and stuff. And I should actually ask you if that's good, but that's what I did. And I had the kind of this like printout of all of the foods that are really supportive and like movement, and like I really like, at least how I did it years ago, was it separated even like sweeteners, right? So if you want to sweeten something like a tea or a coffee, or I don't know, oatmeal. There's a
Mhm.
difference between honey or maple syrup for each dosha, or even like I make my own milk. And so, if I remember correctly, no, I'm supposed to eat figs actually. Like the difference between figs and dates. And so,
Yes.
like, I can sweeten with like well, actually, I don't think kaphas are supposed to have dates necessarily, but I do still sweeten with dates. But like,
Okay.
I used to eat a lot of figs when I learned that. And the interesting thing is, even going back to a simpler example of cold water versus warm water, I
Mhm.
always would drink cold water through
Mhm.
college. And once I learned this whole Ayurveda, or I started kind of practicing Ayurveda a little bit more,
Mhm.
I slowly slowed down the cold water that I was consuming.
Mhm.
And now, years later, I feel like, especially in the winter, like I cannot have cold water at
Mhm.
all. I don't like cold water at all. I'll drink room temperature water, and that's totally
Mhm.
fine with me. But I also do drink a lot of teas. But it's interesting when you introduce these things and then you kind of give your body a chance to feel how it feels, that you
Mhm.
then start craving the like warm water or the bone broth. I really love bone broth in the winter. Like you almost start craving that, and then it's like, no, I don't want to just get a salad when it's 10 degrees outside. I don't want to eat
Yes.
something cold and raw.
Right. And that is the really wonderful thing I like about Ayurveda too, is that it's a slow process. So we can work with someone and give them a lot of suggestions, but
Mm.
typically we try to ask them just to try one. Or, if someone's a night owl and they'd like to fall asleep at 1 o'clock in the morning. The suggestion is to go to bed a little earlier than that, like around like 10, maybe a little before that. And what we do is we work towards feeling better, right? So, and our system working better, right? And
Yeah.
processing things in a way that allows you to feel good, right? It really is that. And to thrive, right? So, um, in doing things slowly, um, over time, and nourishing, like continuing to nourish and give you the good, give you the stuff that like continues to give you the balance, without saying don't do this, don't do that. It's more along the lines, you can do this. You can
Mm.
do this. You can do this too. And you can do that. And over time, I can do this, I can do this. This is great. Over time, the things that I've noticed too, that over time, the things that I probably would be better off not doing,
Mm.
just there was no longer space for it.
Wow.
It wasn't like I should or shouldn't do this. It was more along the lines of like I didn't crave it anymore. It wasn't something that was part of, I didn't need it anymore or want it anymore. It was more and again, because guess what? That could be good for somebody else. Right? So if we put in more of the positive spin, which I feel really is most of it is positive. What works for one doesn't always work for the other, but it's always still okay.
Mm,
Um, there's always that understanding of like I can do these things for myself.
mm,
And over time, the things that aren't necessarily working in my body anymore, I will no longer crave as much.
mm.
So that tends to be nice for
So
people that,
interesting. Yeah. And
yeah.
I love that because that's what I always said with diets. Like
Mhm.
it's so diets are terrible because you're pulling things out.
Yeah, you're
And
like, I can't
there's
do
actually a lot of research. I forget where I read this. It might have been in Atomic Habits, I think.
it. Hmm.
But there's a lot of research on when we pull something out or multiple things out, like keto, right? You can't have carbs. You might lose 10 pounds, but the research has shown that 6 months post that diet, the participants gained double what they lost. So if you lost 10 pounds 6 months post, you've gained 20 pounds. And it's because I mean, it is so psychological too, but like, I don't believe that we really need to pull anything completely out of our diet or our workout schedule or whatever, whatever it is, whatever we're talking about. I think food is easy to talk about, like you said.
Sure.
But that's what I really loved about, not that I'm like a huge supporter of intermittent fasting, but I really loved that about intermittent fasting is you're not pulling anything out. You're actually just adjusting the times where you're eating. And again, kind of going back to what you said with the Ayurvedic principles, eating the biggest meal in the middle of the day, which kind of ends up being fasting. For me, at least, it was like I would eat the majority of my meal, which is probably why fasting worked actually for me. The
Mhm.
majority of my like calories came from lunchtime because I would break my fast and then like an hour or two later I would have like food and that would be about lunchtime. And then by the time your like evening comes, you don't want to eat like a huge meal anyway because you're not that hungry.
Mhm.
But anyway, that's I'm not like suggesting fasting, but I'm just sharing that's an example, another
Yeah.
example of we're not taking something out and restricting ourselves. And I like that you're saying like we can try this. Like just try it. Like
Mhm.
I don't know, find your dosha, which actually I want to ask you. And then try a couple things. And one of my favorite things that my mom has always said is when you try something, then just notice how your body feels. Like when
Yeah.
you eat something, notice how your body feels afterwards. When you do this workout, notice how your body feels afterwards because your body is telling you if it's working for you or not. But a lot of times we don't listen. It's like you eat, like a big plate of spaghetti and you're like, oh, I feel terrible. But then tomorrow you eat another big bowl of spaghetti and it's like, okay. But my question is because I want to come back to that with the quiz, because I know that there's a lot of quizzes online, and I haven't done this for years, so I don't even know what's out there now. But
Mhm.
do you suggest taking a quiz? Is that the best course of action? Should we do something else to figure out our dosha?
Sure. There's a couple things too that can be challenging as well because sometimes our dosha, what we attempt to do with these questions is to find your natural state, your original state. Okay.
Okay.
Which is what we were, sometimes I ask a lot of questions about, oh, when you were a kid, what were your favorite foods? And so that usually tells us some stuff. Um, because I can say for a fact, like these were the things that I did not like eating when I was a child. Oh, and guess what? Now I'm an adult and I'm realizing I forced myself to eat these things thinking I was supposed to eat it. And when I was a child, I already knew I wasn't supposed to eat it. So,
Mm.
so I realized there were some things I had to take out a little bit. Over time, I didn't really have them in my diet anymore. But
Mm.
um, that is an example, like when you do with a practitioner versus when you do it online. Um, so online, you can absolutely do a quiz. Sometimes these quizzes can tell you what's going on today,
Mm.
right? How your body's exhibiting the elements today, which may not necessarily be your original state. However, it's still great to know that because you're still working towards feeling balance on the inside. So these quizzes are lovely to assist you in understanding in the moment how you're feeling and what's going on. And they do help to figure out what you want to do for yourself. Absolutely. I've done it too. I've done a couple of them just
Mhm.
to kind of guess and see how it felt, versus doing it with someone.
Mm.
Um, there's a lot of questions and you can answer them, and it's really fun and just see. And then when you correlate with the list of food and everything, there's some websites that really have a great description of it and then telling you what's better to eat, how to support your body. There's great descriptions like that. So yeah, give it a go, see what happens. But what I do know, and I remember for myself, just because I did it for me, right, is it was more along how I was doing in the moment today,
Okay.
um, which is also great too. It could be your dosha from, your original state, or it could be right now, how you're feeling right now. But either way, it's still helpful. It's is
Yeah.
helpful information. Um,
Yeah. It
you know,
reminds me of like homeopathy. I worked with I don't know if you call them homeopathists. Well, I don't know what you call them actually, but somebody that practices homeopathy. And yeah, it was really cool to have that conversation with her because I mean, homeopathy is I should actually have somebody on my podcast, but it's kind of taking like this very holistic approach, but she would ask me like all of these questions from childhood and stuff too, and it's more of a full picture than just answering, the quiz questions, but I do think that the quiz is a good place to start, and I like that
yeah,
that's kind of an option that we have if we don't want to dive in and work with a Ayurvedic practitioner right away.
absolutely.
Um, One of the things that I want to talk about too is okay, so maybe we're not interested in like finding out our dosha right now, and maybe that's something that we want to put in a box and revisit later. But there
Mhm.
are ways that we can, you've mentioned a couple times of seasonally supporting ourselves and things that we can just generally do based off of the outside environment and not like primarily our inside environment. What are some things that we can do kind of moving from this winter season to the spring? And like yeah, you mentioned, like everything's kind of melting right now and we're kind of moving into like a heavier season. So, what kind of foods can we be eating? What kind of movement can we do? Are there any other tools that you find really supportive in this season, which is really hard for a lot of people? Like winter, I mean, we're both in New England and I have people that listen everywhere, but even my best friend from North Carolina, she's like, it's so cold. It's like 40 degrees. I'm like, I wish it was 40, but it's still
Right.
cold for them. So,
Yeah.
so no matter where you are, the winter is chillier.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find really, and it is true, I can relate, I know there's someone in Florida and, it's like 60 degrees. They're wearing their parkas and their hats. And I was like, it's probably really cold for them, I guess, like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So it is winter for them too, even though it's a different, extreme, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's this time of year, I think, is also really challenging too, because a lot of people tend to start to have like aches and pains with the transition, which it could be colds. There's this period of time right now that people start to like when things change, right? Even if it's slow, we still have our body still kind of feels like there's mobility,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's change. And when there's mobility, it kind of like disrupts a little bit of our foundation. And it could be immunity, it could be we're exposed out, we're getting out more or we're staying in more, and we're fighting the temperature,
Mm-hmm.
so our body's working harder to take care of itself during this time. And when our body's working harder, that's when we're being asked to place those practices a little bit more into place to support yourself, right? So what can we do to cleanse the body because we're getting to a heavier stage of the year, however, at the same time maintaining that warmth and protection at the same time. So yes, and it's challenging to be like, if I say seasonal eating here in New England this time of year, that's a challenge
Yeah. What can we eat?
because we're like, what can we eat, right? And
What crabs?
I know it's so funny, right? So, and a big piece is, okay, so we have to look back in time a little bit. Okay, what were people eating out of their root cellars, right?
Mm.
What did people pickle? What did people preserve?
Okay.
Okay. And go from there. And sour right now is okay for some, not all. Pungent foods is okay for most. So if we go to like this tastes and what things taste like and how they can affect and assist you, that's also helpful as well.
Mm.
So I would suggest this time of year, still brothy foods. Bone broth is lovely. Even vegetable broth, you can make it pretty substantial if you put in, a seaweed in your broth and let it steep in with some other vegetables. That gives it a, like, call it umami or that depth.
Yeah.
They call it a bone broth, but really it's just more nutrients
Mm.
for the body that you may not get from if you don't utilize the animal.
Mm.
So there's that. Root vegetables are still great. We're heading towards like kale, more of the cleansing foods too as well. So you want some more greens. Like greens are still available. I see kale out in the wintertime. It's still
Mm.
there. So
Mm-hmm.
um, and people have greenhouses too as well. So I kind of have to think that way. Like if a farmer, I'm like, okay, what would a farmer be doing right now? Like, and that's kind of where I'm at. So greens are really great to add to your menu. Um, greens aren't always everybody's favorite are ways to assist that. Like I joke around, I'm like, okay, what would I do when I was little? And if I didn't want to eat it, how would I make sure you cut it up smaller, you put it into your soups, things like
Yeah.
that if it's not your thing. But it is helpful because they are packed with nutrients, and that's what we still need that support of like deeply nutritive food.
Mm.
Um, so that's kind of a piece too as well. Dates are great. Over time start weaning off too and going towards more the fig for
Okay.
all of us too, including just because we're going to the heavier stage of
Yeah.
the year. Depending on your dosha too, you could probably have dates, depending on what you're dealing with too personally, on a personal level, dates might be fine all the time for you.
Mm.
Um, but seasonally, we go in that direction.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and you know, you can do warmer beverages, like milk is still a good. Warmer beverages of milk is still good. Any kind of milk, and nut milk,
Mm-hmm.
good. Oat milk, I don't drink as much just because I don't know. I have had oat milk. I like it, but I don't have it as often as I would a nut milk.
Yeah.
That's just me. Considering blood sugar and everything. So it
Yeah.
is okay. Like anything is good in moderation. I always feel like that. Don't say no, but like everything's good in moderation.
Mm.
So and that's kind of what it is. And then depending on your dosha, like for some people, if you have a lot of fire in you, coconut milk's great. For those of us that have more heaviness nature, almond milk, cashew milk, hemp milk is also
Mm.
lovely. And then those of us that don't mind having cow's milk, that as well is great.
Mm.
Probably when it starts to get a little heavier, I do still maybe milk a little bit, but then I put some spices in it to get it so you can digest it properly.
Mm.
So it really is about playing with it.
Yeah.
Um, if that makes any sense. So
Yeah, it
squash is
does.
still good. The earthier foods are great. I'm just making sure that it's warm and easily to digest. And that's where the spices come into place too. Um,
Ayurveda does use a lot of spices. My mom cooks with so many spices. And cardamom in your milk is amazing if you do warm milk and you are um, I need to ask my mom for the recipe. She made the most incredible warm milk the other night, and I know she puts cardamom in it
yeah.
and maybe nutmeg. I don't remember. But yeah, warm milk at night is amazing. And it's interesting that you said that like difference between coconut milk and almond milk because I definitely would choose almond milk the majority of the time. And yeah, I'm not a huge I like oat milk, but I'm not a huge oat milk. I like pistachio milk actually. You can make wild milks. Like I have a maker machine and I've made like pistachio, macadamia nut, cashew, oat, coconut, almond, flax milk is actually really good. I don't know what
Mhm.
that would be good for your dosha or what dosha would be good for, but what are pungent foods?
Yeah. Pungent
What
food.
are
Yeah.
examples?
So pungency, it could be a lot of things.
Okay.
Um, Garlic has some pungency, onion has some pungency. And that's definitely that's like some people can eat it, some people can't. So
Okay.
that's relative to you. Pungent is also in the spices. So if I, can't find anything pungent in nature to eat as food, I usually just grab a spice and add
Okay.
that into, so of course, like cayenne pepper, um, Depending on, salt and pepper. Pepper
Okay.
alone is pungent. Can be astringent as well. Like a lot of our tastes have a lot of our seasoning also has multiple different factors as well, or multiple different elements as well. So
Okay.
that also can come into play. Pungency, even trying to think like anything. That's the one I always struggle with because I don't eat as much of because I have a lot of fire. Because I'm like,
Ah, I
I
have to,
don't eat a lot of it.
yeah.
And then there's like the long pepper is pungent. There's a thing there's this thing called trickatoo, which is like a couple peppers in one that's very potent as well. Hingvashtika or asafoetida can be pungent, but it's also not too much. Like it's actually good for most people.
Mm.
Let me think what else we can do here. In terms of like food, it's challenging. It's more like fruit can be pungent.
Okay.
Some fruits can be pungent, but fruit we eat alone, and not always. Like citrus can feel pungent, but it's also sour and sweet
Hmm.
and astringent as well. So it really is about the spices too. Um,
Mm.
um, Trying to think. And there's also sometimes sumac can be a little bit pungent, and that's a spice, but it's not a lot.
Oh,
But it's a little bit if you tend to want to stay away from the spicy.
yeah.
Has a little pungency as well.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like things that maybe have like a little kick, but it doesn't have to be like a spicy kick. Just kind of
Yeah.
like garlic to me, like that, like definitely, I love garlic, but that can have like yeah, like a little punch to it maybe. So something like that. Same with onions too, depending on how you
Yeah.
prepare them. But yeah, for sure, those resonated with me.
And mustard seed has a pungency as well,
Yeah.
which is great for the heavier time of year.
Mm,
Also nice to have. Fennel can have a little pungency. It assists into digestion as well.
yeah.
So most spices can have some or little, other than, cayenne, of course, is what I always use as reference is more
Yeah.
the other end. Um,
Very, yeah. I like
yeah.
cayenne too,
So
actually.
yeah, it's great. And it's really great. I could like if I have it, I would probably have it right around now. And I'd put a little bit in like chocolate or something like that that's a little bit heavier that
Oh,
I do
that's
is nice.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kind of a great administer of anything that you're eating. It assists in the assimilation of your food and keeps the circulation going in your body. So I recommend it for most people, but a little bit for some and more for others, depending on, what you're made out of,
Mm.
here.
And I
But
like all these examples because while you're listening, you're gonna find some examples that just kind of like you're like, oh yeah, that would be good. Like that just kind of hit you a little bit long, like harder than the others. Like because as you're saying things, I'm like, absolutely, or like, yeah, that's yeah, maybe, like that's okay. At least
mhm,
I'm finding that. So as you're listening or as you're going through spices, trusting your body that like your body is kind of telling you as you're having this conversation with it of what it wants and what it doesn't want and kind of play around with it. Like that's my favorite thing with food, especially with Ayurveda, is playing around with again trying something and then noticing how you feel and how your body is responding and even when you're thinking about it or cooking it, like how is your body responding and do you feel that it's uplifting or that it's helping you digest or that you're feeling very lethargic and tired after. I think that's a huge one is not
yeah.
noticing how tired we are after eating some things and that's
Mhm.
not necessarily normal. And maybe that's your body telling you that it's not the best thing for it and just noticing. I mean, we don't as maybe with all things, but I do feel especially with food, we don't take a lot of time to notice how you feel afterwards.
Yeah.
And that would be one of my invitations after
Yeah.
listening to today's episode for sure.
Yeah, the mindful eating is what there's a lot of versions of a similar thing, but like, taking the time to sit and notice and smell your food. Um,
Yeah.
Cooking your food is this beginning process of digestion. I don't know if everybody really like thinks about it, but the beginning stages of digestion is feeling a little bit of hunger, preparing your food, smelling your food, touching your food is the
Mm.
beginning stages of digestion.
Yeah, doesn't
But
it touching your food, it actually gets your digestive system working.
yes, with your hands and
Yep.
like no utensils. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and then there you salivate, and then it begins the process, and then you send signals to your body and to your stomach. Oh, you're going to eat soon. It's definitely a primitive, dare I say,
Mhm.
we're animals. So
Mhm.
this is how it does operate, and then slowly eating your food, tasting it, noticing the texture,
Mhm.
smelling your food, noticing how you're sitting. If you can sit cross-legged on your chair, that's a great way to test your digestion as well. It assists in digestion there too.
Hmm. I
But
didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. Sitting cross-legged in your chair or on the floor. If you want to try it sometime, and see what it does take, sitting upright. So it does, that is a challenge for me too as well, while eating. But it is a process, and it creates the strength in the body
Hmm.
to process and work and
That's
digest.
super fun. I'll have to try
Yeah,
that. I'm like
yeah.
imagining everyone going to restaurants now and just sitting cross-legged in their chair.
Imagine.
Never mind. Don't do that. Try it at home first.
Yeah, try it at home.
So for people that are interested in learning more from you and connecting with you, and maybe even if they have a question and want to reach out, where do you hang out the most and how can we stay connected with you?
Absolutely. I am on Facebook and Instagram if you want to reach out. It's under Seed the Spirit is I have Facebook there as well. You can just reach out that way if you want. You can also go through my website, seedthespirit.com, and you can connect with me through my website as well. There's up at the bottom, you can email me, and there's, ways to reach out. Yeah, and just reach out that way. And I'm really good about making sure I respond, within a couple days or well, I try 24 hours at the most, but I make sure I respond as soon as I can. Yeah, any questions, or if you want to touch base, I do a free 20-minute consultation if people just want to have a conversation with me. And that is always open for anyone that has interest in that. And I do make sure I get out in the world too. So I make sure I have some workshops scheduled. So on my website, I usually put workshops and classes in.
Okay.
I
I was
pop
going to ask
around.
if you have a group virtual program or do you just work with clients one-on-one virtually?
Right now, I just work with clients one-on-one, and I do like to get out and workshops. That's kind of what I'm doing these days.
Mm.
Um, I don't know. I like to talk to, I don't know, it's just how
In
I love. It's
person.
my nature.
Yeah.
So currently I'm going to be at the Thomas Memorial Library, and that's this weekend. So it's coming up soon. And I am going to be at Lavish Earth in May I'm trying to remember the date, May 3rd.
Okay.
And that's breath work. I'll be focusing on
Mm.
breath work at that time. And you'll see everything, on my website too in
Cool.
detail if people have interest and want to see it that way. Mhm.
So fun. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for coming. I have one final question, and this is just, I rotate through questions
Okay.
to end the podcast. But what is one practice that helps you come back to yourself when things feel really chaotic or unclear?
Sure. Um, I just sit cross-legged with a cup of a warm beverage that I prefer.
Mm.
And I do focus in on nature and the herbs. So I connect with Mother Nature myself. So if I can't get outside, I at least visualize, the herbs that are the medicinal herbs that we use in Ayurveda, but also here in New England.
Mm.
And that usually brings me back,
Mm.
brings me back to myself. Yeah,
Ah, so simple. I love that.
yeah,
I actually
yes.
had a really good podcast with somebody that talked about David Crow. If you want to continue the podcast journey, he talked about using herbs like as medicine and just all kinds of herbs, like, So, anyway, you could always listen to that if you want to connect a little bit more with herbs, but that's so huge. It's such a powerful tool. Like, you can use that as a meditation, and I think that's really beneficial too.
It is, yes. I feel like if you can't have the herb itself in and of itself tangible, if it's not there, you can still at least meditate on the understanding and the medicinal side. So usually
Love
how it
that.
goes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brett. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom and answering all the fun questions and helping us learn more about Ayurveda. And thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks so much, Hannah. I had a great time.